It was a chilly morning in February 1997, the kind where the air bites at your fingertips and your breath hangs in clouds. In a small, sleepy city nestled in the heart of Ohio, a USPS mail carrier named Sheila Brooks climbed into her delivery van, just like she did every day. Sheila was 34, a single mom with a bright smile and a knack for remembering everyone's names on her route. She was the kind of person who'd wave at kids playing in their yards and slip an extra dog treat to the mutts that trailed her van. That morning, she kissed her 10-year-old daughter, Kayla, goodbye, promising to be home in time for dinner. She hopped into her white Postal van, loaded with letters and packages, and drove off into the quiet streets. The day started like any other until it didn't. By nightfall, Sheila hadn't come home. Her van was found abandoned on a back road, engine cold, mail scattered like leaves in the wind. No trace of her, no clues, no witnesses. It was as if she'd vanished into thin air. For 7 years, her disappearance haunted the city, a mystery that clung to the edges of every conversation, a ghost that lingered in the hearts of those who knew her. Then, in 2004, the city decided to drain its old canal for repairs, and what they found at the bottom would send shockwaves through the community, unraveling secrets buried deeper than anyone could have imagined. Sheila's story wasn't just about a missing woman, it was about a city that felt like it lost a piece of its soul. The canal, a murky ribbon of water that wound through the heart of town, had always been there, a backdrop to kids fishing on summer days and couples strolling at dusk. Nobody thought much of it, just a tired old waterway that hadn't been touched in decades. But when the city announced they were draining it to fix a crumbling lock system, whispers started. People remembered Sheila. They remembered the searches, the flyers, the candlelight vigils. They remembered Kayla, who'd grown from a wide-eyed girl into a teenager, still holding on to the hope that her mom would walk through the door one day. The canal draining wasn't just a construction project, it was a chance to dig up the past, to find answers to questions that had festered for years. What happened to Sheila that day? Did she run away? Was she taken? Or was the truth something nobody was ready to face? As workers pumped out the water, revealing the canal's muddy, weed-choked bottom, they uncovered something that made everyone stop in their tracks. Something that would tie Sheila's disappearance to a moment of kindness years later, a moment that changed everything. Let's rewind for a second, to a different story, one that happened in the same city, just a few years after Sheila vanished. It was 2001, and 17-year-old Marcus Carter was riding the city bus home from his part-time job at the grocery store. Marcus was a black teenager with big dreams, saving every penny for college, determined to make something of himself despite the odds. The bus was packed that evening, standing room only, when a pregnant white woman stepped on, struggling to balance her bags. Without a second thought, Marcus stood up and offered her his seat. It was a small gesture, the kind of thing most people wouldn't think twice about, but the woman's eyes lit up with gratitude. She sat down, and as the bus rumbled along, she scribbled something on a piece of paper and handed it to Marcus just before she got off. He unfolded it, expecting maybe a thank you or a phone number. Instead, the note held words that made his heart race, words that hinted at a truth far bigger than a kind deed on a bus. Words that, years later, would connect to the mystery of Sheila Brooks and the secrets hidden in the canal's depths. That note wasn't just a piece of paper, it was a spark that set off a chain of events nobody could have predicted. Marcus didn't know it then, but what he held in his hands would pull him into a story that had been unraveling for years, a story tied to Sheila's disappearance, to the canal, to the city itself. Back in 1997, when Sheila went missing, the city was different, smaller, tighter-knit, but not without its shadows. There were rumors even then, whispers about strange cars seen near Sheila's route, about a man who'd been hanging around the post office, asking too many questions. The police chased leads that went nowhere, tips about Sheila owing money, about a fight with an ex, about a package she was supposed to deliver that never made it to its destination. Nothing stuck. Kayla grew up with those rumors, carrying the weight of not knowing, her mom's laugh echoing in her dreams. By 2004, when the canal was drained, Kayla was 17, the same age Marcus was when he got that note. The city was buzzing with anticipation, but also dread. What would they find in the canal? A lost shoe? A rusted bike? Or something that would finally explain why Sheila never came home? The day they started draining the canal, the whole city seemed to hold its breath. Crowds gathered along the banks, watching as the water level dropped, exposing years of forgotten things, tires, bottles, a child's toy boat. But then, one of the workers shouted, and everyone froze. They'd found something else, something that didn't belong in the muck. It was heavy, wrapped in plastic, half buried in the silt. The police were called in, and as they cordoned off the area, whispers spread like wildfire. Was it connected to Sheila? Could it finally be the answer everyone had been waiting for? Meanwhile, Marcus, now in his early 20s, was starting to piece together the meaning of that note from years ago. It wasn't just a thank you, it was a clue, a thread that led back to 1997, to Sheila's route, to a moment that nobody else had noticed. What did the pregnant woman know? Why had she chosen Marcus to give that note to? And how did it all tie to the canal, now revealing its secrets one muddy inch at a time? This is where our story begins, at the intersection of two lives, Sheila's and Marcus's, tangled in a mystery that's been buried for years. One woman vanished without a trace, leaving a daughter and a city searching for answers. One teenager's small act of kindness set off a chain reaction that would uncover truths nobody expected. As the canal gave up its secrets and Marcus followed the trail of that note, the city was about to learn that some answers come at a cost. What was in the canal? What did the note say? And how could a single moment of kindness on a bus unravel a mystery that had haunted a community for 7 years? Stick with me, because this story is just getting started, and the truth is stranger and more human than you might think. The crowd along the canal bank grew thicker as the sun dipped low, casting long shadows over the muddy water. It was late spring 2004, and the air buzzed with a mix of curiosity and unease. The workers had stopped their machines, and police officers in navy jackets moved in, their radios crackling with static. Whatever they'd found at the bottom of the canal was big enough to halt the whole operation. Word spread fast, neighbors whispered to neighbors, kids on bikes lingered at the edge of the police tape, and reporters from the local news station shoved microphones toward anyone who'd talk. Kayla Brooks stood near the back of the crowd, her arms crossed tight against her chest. At 17, she was taller now, her face sharper, but her eyes still carried the same quiet hope she'd clung to since she was 10. She didn't know why she'd come to the canal that day, something had pulled her there, a feeling she couldn't shake. Maybe it was the years of unanswered questions about her mom, Sheila, or maybe it was just the need to see for herself what the canal was hiding. Either way, she stood there, watching, her heart pounding as the police pulled something heavy from the muck. It was wrapped in thick, grimy plastic, tied with frayed rope, and it looked wrong, out of place among the rusted cans and tangled weeds. Nobody said it out loud, but everyone was thinking the same thing. Could this be tied to Sheila's disappearance? Back in 1997, Sheila Brooks was more than just a mail carrier, she was a thread in the fabric of the city. She knew the shortcuts through the neighborhoods, the houses where the dogs barked loudest, and the old folks who waited by their mailboxes just to chat. She'd been on the job for 8 years, ever since Kayla was a toddler, and she loved it, even on the coldest days when her fingers numbed around the steering wheel. That February morning, she'd left home with her usual thermos of coffee and a quick hug for Kayla, who was eating cereal at the kitchen table. "See you tonight, baby girl," she'd said, her voice warm as always. Kayla remembered that moment like it was etched in glass, the way her mom's ponytail swung as she grabbed her keys, the jingle of her badge against her jacket. By evening, when Sheila didn't come home, Kayla's grandma, who'd been watching her, called the post office. They said Sheila hadn't checked in after her last stop. The police found her van a few hours later, parked crookedly on a dirt road near the edge of town. The driver's door was open, a few envelopes scattered on the ground, and her thermos sat untouched on the passenger seat. No signs of a struggle, no fingerprints that didn't belong, no witnesses who saw anything strange. It was like the earth had swallowed her whole. For weeks, the city turned itself inside out looking for her. Volunteers combed the woods, divers searched the canal, though it was too murky to see much back then, and the police interviewed everyone on Sheila's route. There was Mr. Larson, the retired mechanic who always tipped his hat when Sheila dropped off his car magazines. There was Mrs. Delgado, who'd baked Sheila cookies just the day before. And then there was the guy nobody could quite pin down, a stranger some folks remembered seeing near the post office, asking about delivery schedules. He was tall, they said, with a scruffy beard and a baseball cap pulled low. The police sketched him based on vague descriptions, but he was a ghost, slipping through every lead. Rumors swirled. Maybe Sheila had run off to start a new life, maybe she'd crossed someone dangerous, maybe that package she was supposed to deliver held something it shouldn't have. Kayla heard it all, even as a kid, the whispers following her to school, to the grocery store, to the park where she'd sit and wonder what she'd done to make her mom leave. Deep down, she didn't believe Sheila would have left her. Not her mom, who'd read her bedtime stories and braided her hair every Sunday. But doubt has a way of creeping in when the years pile up with no answers. Marcus Carter, on the other hand, wasn't thinking about Sheila or the Canal back in 2001 when he gave up his seat on that crowded bus. He was just a kid trying to get through high school, juggling shifts at the grocery store and dreaming of a scholarship to Ohio State. Money was tight, his mom worked double shifts at the hospital, and his dad wasn't in the picture. That evening, the bus was stuffy, the windows fogged from too many bodies packed in close. When the pregnant woman stepped on, her face flushed and her arms full of bags, Marcus didn't hesitate. He stood, smiled, and said, "Here, take my seat." She looked at him like he'd handed her the moon, her eyes soft with something more than gratitude. She was older, maybe in her late 30s, with blonde hair tucked under a scarf and a coat that looked too big for her frame. As she sat, she fumbled in her purse, scribbled something on a scrap of paper, and pressed it into Marcus's hand before she got off at the next stop. "You're a good kid," she said, her voice low, almost urgent. Marcus didn't read the note right away, he shoved it in his pocket, too tired to think much of it. But later, at home, when he unfolded it, the words hit him like a punch. "You don't know it yet, but you just changed everything. Keep this safe. You'll need it one day." Below that, scribbled in a hurry, was a name, Sheila, and a string of numbers that didn't make sense. A phone number? A code? Marcus didn't know, but something about it felt heavy, like a secret he wasn't supposed to have. 4 years, Marcus kept that note tucked in a showbox under his bed, next to his high school diploma and a photo of him and his mom at graduation. He didn't tell anyone about it, not his mom, not his best friend, not even the guidance counselor who helped him get into college. But he couldn't let it go. He'd pull it out sometimes, late at night, turning it over in his hands, wondering who the woman was and why she'd given it to him. By 2004, Marcus was 23, a junior at Ohio State, studying criminal justice and working part-time as a security guard. He'd almost forgotten about the note until the news about the Canal hit the local papers. The city was draining it, and people were talking about Sheila Brooks again. Marcus didn't know Sheila personally, but her name on that note felt like a spark in his brain. He dug the note out, read it again, and started asking questions. Who was the woman on the bus? Why did she mention Sheila? And what did those numbers mean? He started with the library, flipping through old newspaper clippings about Sheila's disappearance, piecing together the timeline. The more he read, the more he felt like that note wasn't random. It was a puzzle piece, and he was starting to see the edges of a picture nobody else had noticed. Meanwhile, the Canal was becoming a spectacle. The police had cordoned off a whole section after finding that plastic-wrapped bundle, and rumors were flying. Some said it was a body, others said it was a stash of stolen goods. The local news ran grainy footage of the workers pulling it out, the camera zooming in on the officers' grim faces. Kayla watched it all from her grandma's living room, the TV casting flickering light across her face. She hadn't told anyone she'd gone to the Canal that day, she didn't want her grandma worrying. But she couldn't stay away. Every night, she dreamed of her mom, sometimes smiling, sometimes calling out from somewhere dark and cold. The dreams felt so real they left her gasping when she woke up. Now, with the Canal being drained, those dreams felt like warnings. She started digging through her mom's old things, stuff she hadn't touched in years, photo albums, a scarf that still smelled faintly of Sheila's perfume, a stack of letters tied with a rubber band. One letter, tucked at the bottom, caught her eye. It was addressed to Sheila, postmarked a week before she vanished, with no return address. The handwriting was shaky, the words cryptic, "Be careful. They're watching." Kayla's hands trembled as she read it. Who was they? And why hadn't anyone found this before? The city was small enough that stories like Sheila's didn't just fade, they wove themselves into the everyday. People at the diner swapped theories over coffee. The barber shop buzzed with talk of the canal. Even the kids at Kayla's school, who barely remembered Sheila, had their own versions of the story, half legend, half ghost tale. But for Kayla, it wasn't a story, it was her life. She started asking questions, too, tracking down people who'd known her mom. She talked to Mr. Larson, who'd moved to a nursing home but still remembered Sheila's laugh. He mentioned that stranger again, the one with the baseball cap, said he'd seen him arguing with someone near the post office the day before Sheila disappeared. Kayla wrote it all down in a notebook, her handwriting messy but determined. She didn't know Marcus yet, didn't know about the note he'd gotten on the bus, but their paths were starting to converge, drawn together by a mystery that refused to stay buried. Marcus, meanwhile, was chasing his own leads. Those numbers on the note, they weren't a phone number, he realized after hours of trial and error. They looked more like coordinates, or maybe a code for something else. He spent nights in his dorm, searching online databases, trying to match them to anything that made sense. He even called the post office, pretending to be a reporter, asking about deliveries from 1997. The clerk, an older woman with a raspy voice, didn't say much, but she mentioned a package that had gone missing the same day Sheila did, a small box, insured, addressed to someone outside the city. Nobody had ever found it. Marcus's gut told him that package was important, but he didn't know why. He started visiting the neighborhoods on Sheila's old route, knocking on doors, asking if anyone remembered anything unusual. Most people didn't want to talk, they'd moved on, or they didn't want to relive the past. But one woman, Mrs. Delgado's daughter, said something that stuck with him. She said her mom had seen a car parked near the canal that day in 1997, a dark sedan with tinted windows. It wasn't there when the police came, but it had been idling for hours, like someone was waiting. The canal kept giving up secrets, too. After the first bundle, workers found more, smaller bags, some with clothes, others with papers so waterlogged they crumbled at the touch. The police weren't saying much, but the city was on edge. Kayla overheard two officers at the diner, talking in low voices about evidence and testing. She didn't know what it meant, but it made her stomach twist. She started spending more time at the canal, watching from a distance, her notebook filling with questions. One afternoon, she saw a guy about her age, maybe a little older, standing near the police tape, staring at the water like it held answers. It was Marcus. He'd come to the canal on a hunch, hoping to feel something, to connect the dots between the note and the mystery. He didn't notice Kayla, but she noticed him, the way his brow furrowed, the way he clutched a folded piece of paper in his hand. She didn't know why, but she felt like he was looking for the same thing she was. As the days passed, the tension in the city grew thicker. The police set up a tent near the canal, and forensic vans came and went. Reporters camped out, their cameras trained on the water. Kayla kept going back, her grandma begging her to stay away, but she couldn't. She needed to know. Marcus, too, was drawn back, his mind racing with possibilities. The note, the package, the car by the canal, it was all connected, he was sure of it. But how? And who was the woman on the bus? Why had she chosen him? The answers were out there, somewhere in the city's quiet streets, in the canal's muddy depths, in the memories of people who'd looked the other way for too long. Kayla and Marcus were circling the same truth, their paths inching closer, but neither knew how close they were to uncovering something that would change everything or how dangerous that truth might be. The air around the canal felt heavier now, like it was holding secrets it didn't want to let go. It was early June 2004, and the city was restless. The police tent by the water's edge had become a fixture, its white canvas flapping in the breeze as officers moved in and out, their faces tight with focus. The plastic-wrapped bundle they'd pulled from the canal was gone, whisked away to some lab for testing, but the smaller bags, stuffed with soggy clothes and unreadable papers, kept piling up. Nobody knew what it all meant, but the whispers were relentless. Some said the canal was a dumping ground for things people wanted forgotten. Others swore it was tied to Sheila Brooks, that whatever was down there would finally explain why she vanished that cold February day in 1997. Kayla Brooks stood at the edge of the crowd again, her sneakers sinking into the soft grass, her notebook clutched tight. She'd been coming here every day after school, watching, waiting, hoping for something, anything that would bring her closer to her mom. But the more she saw, the more questions she had. That letter she'd found in her mom's things, the one that said they're watching, burned in her mind. Who was watching? And why did it feel like the answer was right in front of her, just out of reach? Kayla wasn't the only one drawn to the canal. Marcus Carter was there too, though he kept his distance, leaning against a tree with his hands in his pockets. He'd been coming back every few days, trying to make sense of the note he'd gotten on that bus 3 years ago. The words, "You just changed everything. Keep this safe. You'll need it one day," looped in his head, along with the name Sheila and those cryptic numbers. He'd spent hours at the library, cross-referencing old maps and postal records, convinced the numbers were coordinates or maybe a lockbox code. So far, nothing fit. But the canal kept pulling him back, like it was trying to tell him something. He noticed Kayla that day, the girl with the notebook who always stood a little apart from the crowd. She looked young, maybe 17, with a focus in her eyes that reminded him of himself. He didn't know who she was yet, but something about her felt familiar, like they were both chasing the same ghost. Marcus pulled the note from his pocket, worn soft from handling, and read it again. The woman on the bus had known something, maybe about Sheila, maybe about the canal. But why give the note to him, a random kid? And what did she mean by changed everything? Back in 1997, the city hadn't just lost Sheila, it had cracked open, revealing fault lines nobody wanted to see. The police had worked overtime, chasing tips that led nowhere. There was the stranger in the baseball cap, spotted near the post office, but his trail went cold. Then there was the missing package, the one Sheila was supposed to deliver that day. It was small, insured, addressed to a P.O. box in Cleveland, but it never made it. The post office brushed it off, packages got lost all the time, but the police wondered if it was more than that. They interviewed Sheila's co-workers, her neighbors, even her ex-boyfriend, a guy named Ronnie who'd moved to Indiana a year before she disappeared. Ronnie had an alibi, but his story felt shaky, full of gaps. He said he hadn't talked to Sheila in months, but a neighbor swore they'd seen his car near her house a week before she vanished. The police couldn't pin anything on him, and the case stalled. Meanwhile, the city grappled with its own unease. Sheila was a black woman in a mostly white town, and some folks, Kayla's grandma included, wondered if the police had looked as hard as they would have for someone else. It was a whisper, not a shout, but it left a sting that never quite faded. Kayla's life had been shaped by that sting. After her mom disappeared, it had been her and her grandma, a woman raised on tough love and a fierce belief that Sheila was still out there somewhere. Grandma had kept Sheila's things just as she'd left them, her clothes in the closet, her favorite scarf draped over a chair, the photo albums stacked neatly on a shelf. Kayla used to sit in her mom's room as a kid, touching those things, trying to feel her close. Now, at 17, she was digging deeper, driven by that letter she'd found. Be careful. They're watching. It wasn't just the words, it was the way they felt, like a warning meant for her, too. She started asking more questions, tracking down people who'd known her mom. She visited Mrs. Delgado, who was frail now but still sharp, her kitchen smelling of cinnamon and coffee. Mrs. Delgado remembered Sheila's smile, how she'd always stop to chat about Kayla's school projects. But she also remembered something else, a man who'd come by her house a few days before Sheila vanished, asking if she'd seen a package. He wasn't a mail carrier, Mrs. Delgado said, and he didn't look friendly. Kayla wrote it all down, her heart racing. Was this the guy in the baseball cap? And what was in that package? While Kayla chased her mom's past, Marcus was unraveling a different thread. His criminal justice classes had taught him how to think like an investigator, and he was good at it, methodical, patient, but stubborn. He'd started mapping Sheila's delivery route, using old city records to pinpoint where her van was found. It was a quiet stretch of road, bordered by woods on one side and the canal on the other. No houses, no cameras, just a place where someone could disappear without a trace. Marcus walked the road one evening, the air cool and the canal glinting under the streetlights. He stood where the van had been, trying to imagine what happened. Had Sheila stopped for someone? Had she been forced off the road? The note in his pocket felt heavier, like it was urging him to keep going. He'd started asking around, too, talking to people who lived near the canal back then. One old man, a fisherman who'd lived by the water for decades, said something that stuck with Marcus. He'd seen a car parked near the canal that day in 1997, a dark sedan, just like Mrs. Delgado's daughter had mentioned. It was there for hours, he said, but gone by nightfall. The man hadn't thought much of it at the time, but now, with the canal being drained, he wondered if he should have said something sooner. The canal itself was a character in this story, a silent witness to the city's secrets. It had been built in the 1800s, a lifeline for trade, but by 1997 it was mostly forgotten, a place for kids to skip stones or sneak cigarettes. When Sheila disappeared, divers had searched it, but the water was too dark, too deep. Now, as it was drained, it was giving up pieces of the past, rusted bikes, broken bottles, and those strange bags that made everyone's skin crawl. The police were tight-lipped, but leaks trickled out. One bag had a jacket, faded but intact, with a name stitched inside, Ronnie. Kayla heard it from a kid at school whose dad was a cop. She didn't know if it was her mom's Ronnie, but the name sent a shiver down her spine. She went back to her mom's letters, searching for anything about him, and found a postcard, tucked inside a book, from Ronnie to Sheila, dated 1996. "I'm sorry," it said. "Let's talk." Kayla's hands shook as she read it. What was he sorry for? And why had her mom kept it hidden? Marcus, too, was circling Ronnie. He'd found an old article mentioning Sheila's ex, how the police had questioned him but let him go. Marcus tracked Ronnie down online. He was living in Indiana, working at a warehouse. On a whim, Marcus called, pretending to be a student writing a paper on cold cases. Ronnie sounded gruff, guarded, but he talked. He said he hadn't seen Sheila in years, that he'd moved on. But when Marcus mentioned the canal, Ronnie went quiet for a long moment before saying, "That place always gave me the creeps." Marcus hung up, his gut telling him Ronnie knew more than he was letting on. He started digging into Ronnie's past, pulling court records, looking for anything that might connect him to Sheila or the canal. What he found was small but unsettling: a speeding ticket from 1997, issued near the city, a week after Sheila vanished. Ronnie had said he was long gone by then. So why was he back? As Kayla and Marcus chased their leads, a subplot was unfolding at the police station. Detective Linda Harper, who'd worked Sheila's case in 1997, had never let it go. Now in her 50s, she was nearing retirement, but the canal had pulled her back in. She'd been a rookie when Sheila disappeared, and the case had haunted her, partly because she'd always felt the department hadn't done enough. Linda was at the canal every day, overseeing the evidence collection, her notepad filled with observations. She noticed things others missed, like how some of the bags in the canal had been weighted down, like someone wanted them to stay hidden. She also noticed Kayla, the girl who kept showing up, looking like a younger version of Sheila. Linda remembered Kayla as a kid, clinging to her grandma at the police station, asking when her mom was coming home. Now, seeing her at the canal, Linda felt a pang of guilt. She approached Kayla one afternoon, asking if she was okay. Kayla hesitated, then showed her the letter she'd found. Linda's eyes narrowed as she read it. "They're watching." She didn't say much, but she took a photo of the letter and promised to look into it. What she didn't tell Kayla was that she'd seen similar notes before, in other cases that never made the news. The city was a pressure cooker now, every conversation circling back to the canal. At the diner, people swapped stories about strange things they'd seen near the water over the years: a car idling late at night, a figure tossing something over the bridge. At the barbershop, an old-timer claimed he'd heard rumors of a smuggling ring in the 90s, using the canal to move goods. Nobody knew if it was true, but it fed the tension. Kayla and Marcus were still strangers, but their paths were tangling tighter. One evening, at the library, they ended up at the same table, both buried in old newspapers. Kayla noticed the article Marcus was reading about her mom, and her breath caught. She didn't say anything, but she watched him, wondering why he cared. Marcus felt her stare but didn't look up. He wasn't ready to share the note, not yet. But he knew he was close to something, and so did Kayla. The canal was still giving up secrets, and the truth, whatever it was waiting, just below the surface, ready to pull them both under. The summer heat settled over the city like a heavy blanket, making the air around the canal thick and restless. It was mid-June 2004, and the once quiet waterway had become the heart of a storm that nobody could ignore. The police tent was now a hub of activity, with forensic teams in white suits combing through the muddy finds, their faces grim under the glare of portable floodlights. The plastic-wrapped bundle from the canal's depths was still a mystery, locked away in a lab somewhere, but the smaller bags, filled with waterlogged clothes, papers, and odd trinkets, kept piling up, each one feeding the city's growing unease. Rumors swirled faster now. Some said the canal held proof of a crime, others whispered it was a cover-up, a secret buried by someone with power. Kayla Brooks stood at the edge of the crowd, her notebook now a tattered lifeline, its pages filled with scribbled clues about her mom, Sheila. The letter she'd found, "Be careful. They're watching," was tucked in her pocket, its words a constant pulse in her mind. She was 17, but the weight of 7 years without answers made her feel older, like she'd been carrying the mystery of her mom's disappearance her whole life. Every trip to the canal felt like a step closer to the truth, but also a step into something darker, something that made her check over her shoulder when she walked home at night. Marcus Carter was there too, his eyes scanning the water's edge, the note from the bus still burning a hole in his pocket. He'd been chasing its meaning for weeks, the cryptic words, "You just changed everything. Keep this safe. You'll need it one day," and the name Sheila, paired with those strange numbers, driving him to dig deeper. He'd narrowed the numbers down to a set of coordinates, not far from where Sheila's van was found in 1997, near the canal's bend. He'd walked the spot late one evening, the silence broken only by the hum of crickets and the distant rush of water. Standing there, he could almost feel the weight of that day, the moment Sheila vanished. The coordinates pointed to a patch of woods, overgrown and tangled, but he hadn't found anything yet, no lockbox, no marker, just dirt and shadows. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that the note was a key, and the woman on the bus, her face now a blurry memory, had known something about Sheila's fate. Marcus had seen Kayla at the canal before, the girl with the notebook, and now he was starting to wonder if she was connected to Sheila, too. Their eyes had met briefly at the library, a silent question passing between them, but neither had spoken. Not yet. The city was unraveling, its quiet streets humming with tension. At the diner, old-timers swapped stories of other disappearances, cases that never made the news, while kids at Kayla's school whispered about the canal like it was cursed. The police weren't talking, but leaks kept slipping out. The jacket with Ronnie's name stitched inside, found in one of the canal's bags, had sent shockwaves through the investigation. Detective Linda Harper, who'd been on Sheila's case from the start, was piecing things together, her notepad now a maze of connections. She'd found a report from 1997, buried in the station's archives, about a witness who'd seen a dark sedan near the canal the day Sheila disappeared. The witness, a delivery driver, had noted the car's license plate, but the lead was never followed up. Sloppy work, Linda thought, or maybe something worse. She cross-checked it with Ronnie's speeding ticket from a week later, and her stomach dropped. The plates matched. Ronnie, Sheila's ex, had lied about being out of town. Linda kept this to herself for now, but she was watching him, digging into his past, and she couldn't shake the feeling that the canal was about to blow the case wide open. Kayla's search was taking her deeper into her mom's life, and it was starting to scare her. She'd gone back to Mrs. Delgado's house, bringing a plate of her grandma's cornbread as an excuse to talk. Mrs. Delgado's memory was spotty now, but she remembered the man who'd asked about a package before Sheila vanished. He had cold eyes, she said, her hands trembling around her coffee mug. Not like Sheila's. Hers were warm, like she saw you. Kayla pressed her, asking if the man had said anything else. Mrs. Delgado frowned, then mentioned a name, Ronnie. She wasn't sure if it was the same Ronnie, but she'd overheard him talking to someone on Sheila's route, something about making things right. Kayla's heart raced as she wrote it down. Ronnie had been her mom's ex, a guy her grandma never liked, always saying he was trouble. The postcard Kayla had found, "I'm sorry. Let's talk," was starting to feel like a warning, not an apology. She went home that night and dug through more of her mom's things, finding a photo tucked in an old purse. It was Sheila and Ronnie, smiling at a fair, but someone had scratched out Ronnie's face with a pen. Kayla's hands shook as she held it. Who had done that? Her mom. Or someone else. Marcus was hitting walls, too, but he wasn't giving up. He'd gone back to the coordinates, this time with a flashlight and a shovel, digging in the woods near the canal until his arms ached. He found nothing but roots and rocks, but the act of digging felt like defiance, like he was forcing the truth to show itself. He'd also been tracking the woman from the bus, piecing together what little he knew. She'd been pregnant, blonde, maybe in her late 30s in 2001, which meant she'd be in her 40s now. He'd called the bus company, asking about routes from that day, but their records were spotty. Then he remembered something. She'd gotten off near the old textile mill, a crumbling building by the canal that had been abandoned since the 90s. On a hunch, he went there, slipping through a broken gate to explore the empty lot. Inside, the air was stale, the floor littered with broken glass. He found nothing at first, but then, in a corner, he spotted a faded flyer, half-torn, pinned to a bulletin board. It was for a missing person, Sheila Brooks. And scrawled in the margin, in handwriting that matched his note, was a single word, Canal. Marcus's breath caught. Was this a coincidence? Or had the woman been here, leaving clues for someone to find? Detective Harper was chasing her own ghosts. She'd started re-interviewing witnesses from 1997, starting with the delivery driver who'd seen the sedan. He was older now, retired, but his memory was clear. The car had been parked near the canal's bridge, its engine running, and he'd seen two people inside, a man and a woman. The woman had looked upset, he said, like she was arguing. Linda pressed him for details, but he couldn't be sure if it was Sheila. Still, it was enough to make her pull Ronnie's file again. She found something new, a phone record from 1997, showing a call from Ronnie's number to a payphone near the canal, hours before Sheila's van was found. Linda's pulse quickened. She didn't have enough to bring him in, not yet, but she was getting close. She also kept an eye on Kayla, who was still showing up at the canal, her notebook now a familiar sight. Linda wanted to protect her, but she also knew Kayla was digging into things that might be dangerous. That letter, they're watching, had echoes of other cases Linda had seen, cases involving people who knew too much and paid for it. She didn't tell Kayla, but she was starting to wonder if Sheila had stumbled into something bigger than a missing package. The city was on edge, every creak of a floorboard or shadow in an alley feeling like a clue. At the barbershop, an old man swore he'd seen Ronnie back in town last week, skulking near the canal at dusk. At the diner, a waitress mentioned a strange customer who'd asked about the draining, then left without touching his food. Kayla overheard these stories, each one twisting the knot in her stomach tighter. She started following Ronnie's old haunts, places her mom had mentioned in passing, a bar, a gas station, a park near the canal. One night, at the park, she saw a man watching her from across the street, his face half hidden by a hood. She froze, her hand on the letter in her pocket, and ran home, her heart pounding. Was it Ronnie? Or someone else? She didn't tell her grandma, she didn't want to worry her, but she couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching her, just like the letter warned. Marcus was feeling it, too. He'd started getting hang-up calls, the phone ringing late at night with no one on the other end. Once, he thought he heard breathing before the line went dead. He told himself it was nothing, but he started locking his dorm room door, something he'd never bothered with before. He went back to the textile mill, this time with a friend from his criminal justice class, hoping to find more clues. They found another flyer, this one newer, with Sheila's face and a handwritten note, "Ask about the package." Marcus's hands shook as he folded it into his pocket, next to the bus note. He was sure now the woman on the bus had been trying to tell him something tied to Sheila, to the canal, to that missing package. But who was she? And why him? He thought about going to the police, but something held him back. What if they didn't believe him? Or worse, what if they were part of whatever they were in Kayla's letter? Kayla and Marcus finally crossed paths for real one evening at the canal, as the sun dipped below the trees, painting the water gold. Kayla was there, sketching the police tent in her notebook, when Marcus approached, his hands shoved in his pockets. "You're here a lot," he said, his voice low, testing the waters. Kayla looked up, startled, her pen freezing mid-line. She recognized him from the library, the guy reading about her mom. "So are you," she shot back, her guard up. They stood there, sizing each other up, the air thick with unspoken questions. Marcus hesitated, then pulled the note from his pocket, holding it out. "I got this a few years ago. It's got your mom's name on it." Kayla's eyes widened, her breath catching as she read the words. She pulled out her letter, showing him the shaky handwriting. "They're watching." The handwriting matched. They stared at each other, the canal gurgling softly behind them, the police lights flashing in the distance. They didn't know it yet, but they were standing at the edge of something massive, something that tied Sheila's disappearance to the note, to the canal, to Ronnie, to secrets the city had buried for years. The truth was close now, so close they could almost touch it, but it was dangerous, and it was watching them, too. The next morning, the city woke to a bombshell. The local news ran a story that the police had found something new in the canal, not another bag, but a piece of metal, rusted but unmistakable, a license plate, pulled from the mud near where the plastic-wrapped bundle had been. It matched the sedan from 1997, the one tied to Ronnie's speeding ticket, the one seen by the canal the day Sheila vanished. The reporters didn't have all the details, but they hinted at a breakthrough, and the city exploded with speculation. At the diner, people whispered about a cover-up, about someone powerful keeping the truth buried. At the barbershop, an old man swore he'd seen Victor Klein back in town, driving a new car but with the same shifty eyes. Kayla heard it all at school, her classmates buzzing with theories, but she couldn't focus. She kept thinking about the woman by the canal, her scarf, her quick exit. She went back to her mom's things that night, desperate for another clue, and found something she'd missed before, a small key, taped to the inside of a jewelry box, with a tag that read safe. Kayla's hands trembled as she held it. A safe deposit box. A locker. She didn't know, but it felt like a lifeline, a piece of her mom she could still touch. Marcus, meanwhile, was chasing the woman from the bus. He went back to the textile mill, this time alone, his flashlight cutting through the dark. The place was eerie, its walls crumbling, the air thick with dust. He found another flyer, this one tucked behind a loose board, with Sheila's face and more handwriting. "Don't trust the police." Marcus's stomach dropped. Was this why the woman hadn't gone to the cops? Was someone inside the department part of they? He took the flyer and left, his heart racing, but as he slipped through the gate, he heard footsteps behind him, quick, deliberate. He turned, but no one was there. Just shadows. He ran to his car, locking the doors, the flyer crumpled in his fist. He didn't know who to trust anymore, but he knew he had to find Kayla. She was part of this, and so was he. They were in too deep to turn back. Detective Harper was feeling the walls close in, too. She'd tracked Victor Klein to a rundown apartment on the edge of town, but when she knocked, nobody answered. A neighbor said Victor had been gone for days, maybe longer. Linda didn't buy it, she'd seen his name pop up in a recent property record, tied to a storage unit near the canal. She drove there that night, her headlights cutting through the fog, and found the unit locked tight. She didn't have a warrant, but she called in a favor, getting a clerk to check the rental records. The unit had been paid for in cash, under a name that wasn't Victor's but felt familiar, the same P.O. box address as Sheila's missing package. Linda's pulse raced. She was close, so close, but she knew better than to go in alone. Whatever was in that unit, it was tied to the canal, to Ronnie, to Sheila. And maybe to the woman Marcus and Kayla had seen. The plot twisted again that night, when Kayla got a call from an unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. A woman's voice, low and urgent, came through. "Stop looking, Kayla. It's not safe." The line went dead before she could respond. Kayla stood frozen in her bedroom, the key from the jewelry box in her hand, her heart hammering. It was the woman from the canal, she was sure of it. But how did she know Kayla's name? And why warn her now? Kayla didn't tell her grandma, she was already worried enough, but she called Marcus, her voice shaking as she told him about the call. Marcus was at his dorm, staring at the flyer from the mill, the words "don't trust the police" burning into his brain. "We need to find that woman," he said. "She's the key." They agreed to meet at the canal the next day, to search for her, to follow the coordinates, to unlock whatever the key was meant for. But as they hung up, both felt the same chill. Someone was watching, and the truth was closer than ever, but it came with a price they weren't sure they could pay. Wasn't Sheila, it was the package, hidden to keep it from the police. The city exhaled as Ronnie was arrested, the smuggling ring exposed, and the businessman's name splashed across the news. Kayla and Marcus became local heroes, their story of persistence and courage lighting up the diner and barber shop. Linda closed Sheila's case, the papers from the woods and the canal's evidence enough to convict Ronnie and Victor, though the businessman's lawyers were already spinning defenses. Kayla read her mom's letter every night, feeling closer to her than ever, knowing Sheila had fought for the truth. Marcus kept Ellen's note, a reminder that a single act of kindness on a bus had unraveled a mystery. They thought it was over, the canal's secrets laid bare, until the final twist came a week later. A worker draining the last section of the canal found another bundle, smaller, wrapped in plastic like the first. When the police opened it, they found a locket, Sheila's, the one she'd worn every day, engraved with Kayla's name. It was empty, no trace of Sheila, but its presence in the canal, hidden all these years, whispered a chilling question. If Ronnie was telling the truth, and the first bundle wasn't Sheila, then where was she? Kayla held the locket, her fingers tracing its edges, her heart torn between closure and a new, haunting hope. The canal kept its last secret, leaving the city and Kayla wondering if the truth was still out there, waiting to be found. The discovery of Sheila's locket in the canal hit Kayla like a punch, stirring up a storm of emotions she thought she'd buried. It was late June 2004, and the city was still reeling from Ronnie's arrest and the exposure of the smuggling ring that had tangled Sheila's life in its web. The locket, small and silver, engraved with Kayla's name, was now in her hands, a piece of her mom she could hold on to, but it came with a question that gnawed at her. If the plastic-wrapped bundle in the canal wasn't Sheila, as Ronnie claimed, then where was she? Kayla sat on her bed that night, the locket dangling from her fingers, catching the dim light of her lamp. The letter from her mom, found in the safe deposit box, lay open beside her, its words a lifeline and a wound. I found something I wasn't supposed to, Sheila had written, and now Kayla understood she'd stumbled onto a smuggling operation, a dangerous secret tied to Victor Klein, Ronnie, and a powerful businessman who'd kept the city in his grip. But the locket, found separate from the bundle, suggested something else, something nobody had answers for yet. Kayla's grandma knocked softly on her door, her eyes heavy with worry. "You okay, baby?" she asked. Kayla nodded, but her grip on the locket tightened. She wasn't okay, not yet, but she was determined to find the truth, no matter how much it hurt. Marcus was struggling, too. The locket's discovery had shaken him, making the note from the bus feel heavier than ever. He sat in his dorm, staring at the flyer from the textile mill, the words "Don't trust the police" scrawled in Ellen's handwriting. Ellen, the woman from the bus, had been Sheila's friend, a silent witness to the danger Sheila faced in 1997. Her note to Marcus, given years later, had set him on this path, but now he wondered if she'd known more than she'd let on. He'd seen her at the canal, heard her confront Ronnie, but she'd disappeared again after that night, leaving no trace. Marcus called the number she'd used to warn Kayla, but it was disconnected. He went back to the library, combing through old records, hoping to find her, to ask why she'd chosen him, why she'd waited so long to act. The smuggling ring was crumbling, Victor was in custody, the businessman's empire under scrutiny, but Sheila's fate was still a shadow, and Marcus couldn't let it go. He thought of Kayla, her fierce determination, her notebook full of clues. They'd become partners in this, bound by a mystery that had changed them both, and he knew they had to see it through together. Detective Linda Harper was wrestling with her own ghosts. She'd closed Sheila's case officially, with Ronnie and Victor charged for their roles in the smuggling ring and the cover-up of the missing package. The papers from the woods, found by Kayla and Marcus, had been the key, detailing payments, shipments, and names that tied the operation to the canal. The plastic-wrapped bundle, as Ronnie claimed, was the package Sheila had delivered, a stash of documents and cash meant to stay hidden. But the locket was a curveball, a piece that didn't fit. Linda sat at her desk, her notepad worn from weeks of scribbling, and stared at a photo of Sheila from 1997, her smile bright against the backdrop of her postal van. Linda had always felt she'd failed Sheila, that the department's sloppy work, or worse, interference from someone higher up, had let the case go cold. Now, with the locket in evidence, she couldn't shake the feeling that Sheila might still be out there, that the Canal hadn't told its whole story. She called Kayla, asking her to come to the station, wanting to share what little she knew, hoping to give her some peace. Kayla and Marcus met at the station the next day, the locket in a plastic evidence bag between them. Linda laid out what she'd found. The locket had been found in a different part of the Canal, wrapped separately, as if placed there later. It wasn't with the bundle, which meant someone had hidden it after Sheila vanished. It's possible, Linda said, her voice careful, that Sheila left it there herself, as a message. Kayla's eyes widened, her fingers brushing the bag. You think she's alive? She asked, her voice trembling with hope and fear. Linda hesitated. I don't know, Kayla. But this locket, it's personal. It's not something you'd lose by accident. Marcus leaned forward, his mind racing. What about Ellen? She knew Sheila. She warned us to stop. Maybe she knows where Sheila is. Linda nodded, her jaw tight. She'd been trying to find Ellen, too, but the woman was a ghost, her last known address a dead end. Still, Linda had a lead, a friend of Ellen's, a nurse who'd worked with her in 1997, who might know where she'd gone. They tracked the nurse down at a hospital in Cleveland, a 2-hour drive from the city. She was older now, her hair graying, but she remembered Ellen vividly. She was scared back then, the nurse said, her voice low as they sat in the hospital cafeteria. She and Sheila were close, always talking about their kids. Ellen was pregnant, due any day, when Sheila disappeared. She told me she'd seen something she shouldn't have, something about a package Sheila was delivering. She wanted to go to the police, but she got a note said they're watching. She left town right after, to protect her baby. Kayla's heart sank, recognizing the words from her mom's letter. Marcus showed the nurse the note from the bus, and her eyes widened. That's Ellen's writing, she confirmed. She came back a few years ago, said she felt guilty for staying quiet. She was trying to make things right. The nurse didn't know where Ellen was now, but she gave them a name, Sarah Klein, Victor's sister, who'd been Ellen's roommate in 1997. Sarah might know where Ellen was hiding. Kayla and Marcus drove to Sarah's last known address, a small house on the outskirts of the city. The place was run down, the lawn overgrown, but a light was on inside. Sarah answered the door, her face wary, her resemblance to Victor uncanny. She didn't want to talk at first, but Kayla's desperation, holding up the locket, her voice breaking as she mentioned Sheila, softened her. Sarah invited them in, her hands fidgeting as she spoke. Ellen came to me a few weeks ago, she said. She was scared, said the canal being drained was stirring things up. She told me Sheila had found out about Victor's operation, how they were moving money through the post office, using carriers who didn't ask questions. Sheila asked too many, and they panicked. Sarah's eyes darted to the window, like she was expecting someone. Ellen said Sheila got away that day, ran from Ronnie near the canal. She hid the locket, hoping someone would find it, but she never came back. Kayla's breath hitched. So she's alive? Sarah shook her head. Ellen didn't know. She said Sheila was supposed to meet her at a motel, but she never showed. I've been looking for her ever since. The words hit Kayla like a tidal wave. Her mom might be alive, or might have been. She gripped the locket, her mind racing. Marcus pressed Sarah for more, but she clammed up, saying she'd already said too much. As they left, Kayla felt a mix of hope and dread. Sheila had escaped Ronnie, left the locket as a clue, but then what? They drove back in silence, the weight of Sarah's words settling in. At the canal, they met Linda, who'd been following her own lead on Ellen. She'd found an address in a nearby town, a safe house where Ellen might be staying. They went together, the fog thickening as they drove, the road ahead barely visible. The safe house was a small cabin, tucked in the woods, its windows dark. They knocked, and Ellen answered, her face pale but unsurprised. I knew you'd find me, she said, letting them in. Inside, Ellen told them everything. In 1997, she'd seen Ronnie arguing with Sheila near the canal, overheard him demanding the package. Sheila had realized it was dangerous, refused to hand it over, and ran. Ellen tried to help, leaving the "they're watching" note in Sheila's mailbox, but it was too late. She fled to protect her unborn child, haunted by guilt for years. In 2001, she saw Marcus on the bus, his kindness reminding her of Sheila, and gave him the note, hoping he'd uncover the truth someday. "I thought Sheila was gone," Ellen said, tears in her eyes. "But the locket, it means she got away, at least for a while." Kayla's hands shook as she showed Ellen the locket. "Where is she now?" Ellen's face crumpled. "I don't know. She was supposed to meet me at a motel, but she never showed. I've been looking for her ever since." The final piece came a week later, when Linda got a call from a detective in a neighboring county. A woman matching Sheila's description had been spotted in 1998, living under a different name, working at a diner. She'd left abruptly, leaving no trace. Linda tracked the lead, finding a photo from the diner's old records. It was Sheila, older, thinner, but unmistakably her. Kayla cried when she saw it, Marcus steadying her with a hand on her shoulder. The trail went cold after that, but the photo was enough. Sheila had survived, at least for a while, living in hiding, protecting Kayla from the shadows. The city mourned with Kayla, the diner and barbershop filled with stories of her mom's courage. Kayla kept the locket and letter close, a reminder of Sheila's fight. Marcus framed Ellen's note, a symbol of how a small act could change everything. They never found Sheila, but the possibility of her survival was a gift, a spark of hope that kept Kayla going. The canal, now refilled, shimmered quietly, its secrets no longer buried, teaching the city that truth, however painful, was worth chasing. Kayla and Marcus walked its banks one last time, promising to keep looking, their bond forged in a mystery that had reshaped their lives.